come at things from a different point of view, and also for poets to stretch their imagination a little bit. Because the idea of doing ekphrastic poetry has been done for many, many centuries. A poet looks at a piece of art, or actually could be inspired by music, because ekphrastic merely means to describe, and then they write a poem that describes that artwork or music that they've seen. And that's wonderful. But there are thousands of those kinds of poems from Greek times onwards. And so we thought it would be kind of fun and intriguing to have poets come up with a visual image in their poem. And so they get to write the script. They come up with a poem that describes something, an image in words. And then the artist's job is to read that poem, imagine what that image looks like, and use their creativity. And then whether it's abstract or concrete, come up with a piece of art to match it. And so many, actually probably most of the art in this exhibit was made specifically to go with the poems. And the ones that weren't, artists read through the poems and said, I have a piece of art that this poem inspires me to lend you for this exhibit. And so we'll let you know a little bit each time which is which. Come on in, have a seat, don't be shy. The format for today is going to be that a poet will come up and read their poem, and if the artist is present, they will discuss their artist statement. If the artist is not present, that's okay, because I have either got their artist statements or I've curated these in some cases, and so I'll be able to say something about how the art goes with the poem. And we're going to start with, so there's not a particular order. I have the poems in alphabetical order, but we're going to start with somebody who has to leave in 5 minutes. And so Pamela, would you please come forward?
Sure.
And just don't start reading because I have to alert them to start the recording.
Pregnant falls. Hi, everybody. I'm Pamela Brothers-Dennis, and I was honored to be part of this project. I can't wait to see what else comes from it. The poem I wrote is called Hillside Hike. Blue sky reflecting on the shallow lake draws me to pause for the quiet view. Alone in the coolness of a January path, breathing deeply and feeling free, I release winter's pent-up tension, a little more gone with each breath. After a few strong letting go sighs, I hear clack, clack, swoosh, clack, clack. Thinking perhaps I am not alone here, I turn to see a single ancient gargantuan magnolia tree, her waxy, still green leaves clacking in support of my liberation.
Then you take a picture. Don't go anywhere yet. So the piece of art that goes with Pamela's poem is back there on the wall. Thank you for pointing to it, Jack. And when we were curating this particular piece, Kathy Abel Nelson, who is not here today, but she's the artist, she and I were going through her massive library of paintings, and she read your poem, and she just started laughing, and she said, it's about a giant. And I'm thinking what I will do is I'm going to bring it to you because it's just sitting on the shelf.
That does seem to be
You see the face? So this piece of art, look carefully at it, and when we're done, I'll put it back on the shelf and go up and look closely at it. It has eyes and a mouth. This is a giant with a face. And so it just, really struck us that this would be great for your particular poem.
I can see it clapping in support of my liberation.
So
Thank you.
thank you.
And I apologize for not being able to stay for others' readings.
Nancy Allen, I'm not sure she's here.
She was here earlier.
Oh, was she? She'll
She
come to food. Make sure she's not.
came in when I came in.
It won't bite, go ahead, get up.
I didn't make sure that the
No, that's fine.
Okay, well, I will set this aside for a second, in case she does show up. I don't think we have any kids, and I don't mean that as an ageist insult, but one of the cool things about this project is, and Gail's not here either, Gail Giewont, who is a teacher, PSV member, and a teacher at the Appomattox Regional Governor's School, which is not in Appomattox. It's on the Appomattox because it's in Petersburg. Gail is a wonderful teacher and has many gifted students at the Appomattox or ARGS school. And so when Terry and I thought about this project and Gail submitted something, she said, well, you know, I have some really gifted students. And I was like, how wonderful. Let's make this a joint project with adults and students. So this project is actually 50% adult PSV members like yourselves. And then I was actually told that some of the students might make it because if you don't know about ARGS, the Appomattox Regional Governor's School, they bus kids from all over Southern Virginia to Petersburg to attend that school several times a week. It's not based on money. They're gifted students, and some of them come from underprivileged high schools, but they are bused to that school if they're gifted, and it's everything, science, art, music, technology, and so obviously these are poets. I've recently enlisted the art students at ARGS to come up with some additional art that is not shown here, but we have, out of 22 youth poets, we are going to be hearing the poems of 12 of them today, because we had adult artists who came, were inspired by the kids' poems. So I guess I'll be reading the kids' poems, or maybe Terry will do some. So this one was written by Elia Anderson. How quiet it is with no fish. We have to make a lot of money so our teachers don't cry. I can tell it's listening, not because that is all the Appomattox does, but because translating chaos is what we want. And even the plants reject themselves, allowing no communication, no grouping. I almost wish for a canoe because yes, there are scattered empty subjectives, but it listens to us, almost ready to speak. And Elias, so I'm going to ask Gina. Gina, can you stand up and bring that canoe picture forward? Behind you, sorry, it's behind you. And if you can't get out, just pass it down the road.
Oh, I can get out. I'll suck it in.
She's a mom.
So this artist is not here today. Monica, you're not here, right? Okay. So Monica Schaeffler made this painting of a canoe, and it's so lovely because it's very still picture. And I'm going to read Monica's biography briefly, so you know a little bit about. So a little bit of information about the artist Monica Schaeffler. Since she was a child, she enjoyed creating and dreamt of being an artist. I'm going to use I because she wrote this. I became a documentary film editor working in New York, Baltimore, San Francisco, and Virginia. After retiring in 2021, I became a full-time painter. You'd never know it was that recent, working with other artists and exhibiting in the Tidewater region. While painting, I find myself in a timeless zone where memories, emotions, and dreams influence my work. I never really know where a painting will end up, but it usually starts from a treasure trove of old photos I've saved over the years. When something piques my interest, I immerse myself in images, much like I did as a film editor, and think of a story I'd like to tell. Using Photoshop, I experiment with design and composition. I might sketch or paint a small study, but often I just jump right into painting on canvas. Each painting becomes an emotional journey, changing over time until it combines imagery and memories in a way that seems true to me. So that's Monica's art. Thank you. I'm going to ask Terry to come up and read this poem for reasons that will become entirely obvious.
Black Flags by Max Bell. Vultures scavenge just inside of here, pecking at roadkill with their wings stretched impossibly. They glide between cars, float down from transmission towers in sync with the feathers they lose. They're in no rush. They know I am fast bleeding out with nowhere to crawl. Their red-black beaks scratch against the inside of my skull, leaving long, thin hash marks on the inside of bone. Parts of me I have never seen are ripped away. Ribs split in half, cracking open for easier access to this wasteland of the body. A cat watches my own cold entrails torn out and coated in this black tar blood are dragged to the side of my limp, eviscerated body just out of the hand's reach. Vultures choke down these organs, these which are no longer just mine, taking time to digest between hard swallows, spraying blood across the pavement, abandoned by the living for today. Come tomorrow, these birds will be gone. Maybe there will be a straggler or two, and I will dissolve what remaining skin I have, assuming I'm not licked clean. But I suppose rotting meat is only a meal for the starving and not to be savored. And what will lie still is a skeletal frame, abandoned by the dying, by possibility of death. Black bones, black flies, black birds.
And before she sits down, I'm going to ask Terry to discuss the piece of art that goes with this. By the way, that was Max Bell, who is one of the students at Appomattox Regional Governor's School. So that was a kid. Okay, great poet. Terry, tell us about this beautiful piece of art.
I live on the Waterdeep Creek in Newport News. We have a lot of wildlife. We actually don't have that many turkey buzzards because they compete with the osprey and the eagles and you have the hawks, red-tailed hawks. But they have the coolest wobble when you watch them fly, and they're just fabulous gliders. So that is put in Photoshop, and it just lends itself to something kind of otherworldly. It was just flying. But underneath that, we have our wood piles, and now that I think about it, there might have been a mouse or something under there, which is why it was waiting for me to take a picture of it. So there you go.
So in some cases in this exhibit, we have two poems for one piece of art. In other cases, we have two pieces of art for one poem. And it was really funny because one artist was frustrated and said, somebody tried to take my poem. And I was like, no, you can both have the same poem. Anyway, and then another poet said, well, that poet got two pieces of art and I only got one. So putting egos aside, this is one where we matched up Terry's piece of art with a second poem because we thought that it went very well with it. This is another student with the Appomattox Regional Governor's School. Her name is Alexandria Rhodes, and it's called Birds Dressed in Black. The flowers long wilted, with feathers in flame, a town divided by pride and fear, and never ceasing whispers. All the children's are orphaned, or better off as such. Sisters search the starless night for the home lost in their dreams, long gone. Peace departed with daughter's head. After the victory always comes chaos. The new regime brought with it a new age, where guns and flags outnumber people. Songless birds fall like rain onto empty pews. A church at the fork of heaven and hell, God and the devil face to face at the pulpit.
Wow.
Okay, so Jack Callan, I don't know who that guy is. And if you didn't print out your poem and you're gonna be reading, no fear, but if you did, you should. Okay, great.
You can never believe how much work goes into making something like this happen. So you see Kathleen just working her butt off here, getting this going. It's the tail end of all of that work. So Judith and I appreciate this very much because when you get a room full of people, it took something to get them all there. But once we get there, the magic happens. So this is just a wonderful event, and I drove 300 miles to be here, and I wouldn't trade this for anything. My poem was selected, which is not something that I'm used to having happen. This is like a first for me, and I've never read here. But my poem is called Artist in Low Gear, and it came to me from a man jumping out of a gravel truck. Now, I'm up in the woods building what I call Stonehenge, my first building. And the first lines in this long poem, Terry's taking the picture. The first line in this series of poems is like, so there's this guy who's going to build Stonehenge, and none of his help shows up. So he starts anyway. Every now and then his wife comes to visit to check up on him, see if he's working. That's the introduction to my 10-part poem. The poem that was chosen here, Artist in Low Gear, is the fifth one in it. Now, a lot of our poems, I've already noticed, there's a lot of texture in our poems and sounds. And my poem was generated from sounds. There was this man, and he got out of the truck, and he came walking up to me, and he goes, so are you building this place? And I go, yeah. And he goes, where's your help? And I go, nobody's helping me. You built that damn building over there by yourself? He was looking at that by then. He was like, well, damn, son, you need some help. We're going to take this truck and we're not going to let all the rock go out immediately. We're going to do a little bit here and we're going to do a little bit there. And I go, sure, no problem, you know? So all of a sudden I was sort of like, I was writing a poem about me being all alone in the woods. And now I got this guy here. And I'm like, I got to write about him. So just to let you know, though, I'm getting carried away. Every time I put a post on the ground, I said, well, it needs to look really pretty. So this is Judith's next building, and further up there is our outhouse. They both have floors in them before I left yesterday. And anyway, a guy in the woods is really, really happy to be here in a room full of people because there's a lot of stimulation here, and I've been turning a little bit feral. I think I'm reversing course here. We're going to have a little bit of sounds in the back that are going to help accompany the sound of this truck here.
Jack, can you hang on for a
Oh,
second?
sure.
Tina, hand me the truck, please.
And I love this photograph because it didn't have to be accurate, but everywhere in the world that I exist in now are all these people that they don't get rid of their old vehicles, they don't get rid of their old buildings, they all just sit there and dot the landscape, and it's quite beautiful. But this is so perfect because this is the world that I'm living in right now. So, oh, you want me to read the poem?
No,
Okay,
you came just to listen to everybody else's.
A couple of more things that are in here. I've given you the sound of Johnny's voice. Johnny spells his name Johnie. No, Johnnnie. So he has an old country name. And he gets out with this cigarillo. And I mean, it looks like he shaves with a weed eater. So it's so much fun when he comes to the job. But it's, what else in this to tell you about? I'm trying to describe his voice as I read this poem. And, oh, the amazing thing is, this is a giant truck, and it can barely get up my driveway. The driveway is a gravel driveway, 30 degrees up to our platform area. And when this truck is filled with gravel, he takes a chain around both sides, and he puts it on so that the door of the truck, the back flap, will only open up about 8 to 10 inches. And it was so magical to see this happen because I just figured the truck would just blow it out, and he would dump it, and I would be stuck with it. But this guy took pity on me because he knew I had to move all this gravel after he dumped it, which took me days afterwards. So he was trying to be like an artist, as I used in the name of this, artist in low gear. But the truck would then go forward very quickly, and he's got the entire thing elevated like this, and nothing runs out. And then he accelerates and goes forward, and immediately it all starts coming out. So he goes forward very, very quickly, and it's like a ribbon with the most beautiful sound to it. And that's why I wrote this poem. It was the sound, not only of his voice, but of this truck coming out. I have to tell you this last little part. After he was done, and I'm out there with the shovel and the rake trying to move it all around, the farmer across the way is mowing all the grass in this field, and the sun is going down. And all of a sudden, there's a single beam of sunlight coming from between the mountains across this field, and the very last thin strip of grass that he's about to mow has the only strip of sunlight coming across it. So you can see all the Stonehenge imagery that I get. And then he cuts that last grass row, and he disappears. It's silent, and it's dark. So this was my day, and I tried to capture it all in a single poem. I talk a lot. Artist in low gear. Soon a truck of number 5 gravel to fill the crawl space with magic. Wood and concrete hang suspended, hardening as the days cool. While he rumbles down our country road, potholes crashing, exhaust gasping, right on time, like an old chariot itching for battle, with a voice that sounds like moonshine the morning after, like the wind blowing through your lines 100 years ago. So he raises the bed high, the back not yet open, then runs it out like a ribbon with a soft hiss, poured slowly like a landslide. Like an open field created in ancient time, we'll call to the mountains and tell them to rhyme when the tractor crossed the waves on the last row of sunshine.
Thank you so much, Jack and Judy, for the side effects. No, not side effects, sound effects.
Brian McGill.
Oh, Brian did it. I'm sorry. Thank you, Brian McGill, for the sound effects. Yeah, sometimes I'm not totally retired, am I, when I'm calling it sound effects. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about this piece of art. Kathy Abel Nelson, again, she has a gallery in Pocosin. She fosters poetry there.
Oh, we know.
She has readings. And it's actually nowadays a framing gallery. She doesn't attempt to or even want to sell most of her art, which is terrible because her art is wonderful. But this is actually not by her. This piece of art was by P.D., I hope I pronounce it right, P.D. Husson. And P.D. Husson is deceased now, but she was a local artist. And when Kathy and I were talking about art that was in her collection for various poems, she said, oh, I got it. She said, it's not mine, but you can use it, because she owns this piece of art. And so this was taken from a photograph and then painted with watercolors by P.D. Husson, and it actually is for sale. So
Does anybody in P.D. Hudson's family know that this was chosen?
probably not.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't been in contact with
Our
them.
art goes on even after we're dead.
Well, that's right. We all hope to be famous.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You might have to do something. Okay, so,
You probably figured out by now that for the most part, this is in alphabetical order. So give me a high sign if you suddenly need to leave, and I'll move through. But the next one is Joan Ellen Casey, who is here. Will you please come and read your poem?
I can't do anything after that performance. That's
Well, I'll dance and sing.
you'll do that too. The prompt for this was initially Virginia, and it was in a workshop. And the first thing that came to mind was the trees, because when I came here from Texas, I said, oh my God. The other thing was coming here. That was part of the process. There were so many people came to this country, starting with Virginia. And now we have all sorts of problems with them. And so I hope this hits on several levels. In Virginia, where trees dance and sing, and their leaves make art. A couple of days after I finished the poem, the leaves made art. It was a glass table. I picked up the leaf to clean the table, and the dirt and rain had drawn a leaf. Very hard to see, I'm sure, but I'll leave it up here. The trees in Virginia have roots that dig deep into the mountains, lie beneath the loom of the Shenandoah, and breathe through crickled clay to reach the sands of the sea. In spring, they capture new light and twinkle in the sun. They grow into thick shades of green, often blocking out the beyond, while dancing and singing in the wind. Then their leaves fall in shades of peachy orange and make images of themselves on glass-top patio tables, using the rain and dirt to leave a lasting impression. The trees are always there, even in winter, standing on sturdy trunks with branches entwined like arms, reaching out to those coming ashore with only their dreams.
Thank you so much, Joan. And we're not going to be taking the big paintings down from the walls. So when we are done with the readings, the piece of art that goes with this is another one by Kathy Abel Nilsson, and it's called Treant. And it's laughing, and it's just beautiful, and it has leaves that are kind of falling from it too. It's on the left-hand side of the corridor, so, and Joan's poem is hung underneath it the way the rest of them are. So please go look at that one afterwards. Okay, Terry, you want to come read this one? And we can get it. Hang on, you have a mic. Can I have that statue, please? Yeah.
It's a little heavy.
I know, it's turning out to be really useful, and some of these are on the bookshelf.
Some of you may be familiar with this sculpture outside the Virginia Museum of Art. Battle Flag by Owen Collins. This morning, I drove past a flag of imprisonment, a flag of restriction, of bondage, of resentment, of racism. States' rights, as they say, states' rights to enslave, states' rights to strip, rights to pillage, rights to kidnap, rights to segregate to ghettos, to lynch, to murder on the street, to follow you in stores. States' rights to do what? Besides what you do already, like graduation or transitioning to adulthood, the first drive through one of the tunnels is a rite of passage.
And that was written by Owen Collins, who is another Appomattox Regional Governor School youth. And Terry's now going to explain something about this statue.
So if you're not familiar with this artist's work, it's a twist on the traditional paintings of colonists and I don't know the ranks, but people in our wars who are always on horses and riding into battle.
The cavalry.
Cavalry, there you go. And they're always white, and it's, you know, there's always a war going on, and I love how he twists the concept, and he always has a black man. Sometimes there are women in his paintings, but on the horses, this series has a black guy on it, and he's always wearing the tennis shoes and just the contemporary clothing, and nothing like the cavalry. And I love the way he's turning to look around behind him. And this one is entitled Rumors of Battle, Rumors of War. And it's just exquisite, it's beautiful. And the artist's name is Kathleen Wiley, and he also has paintings of Chrysler. So if you've ever read in any of the rooms where we do poetry there, he's got a couple of paintings there that are just huge. And they're just beautiful. Well,
Did he do Obama's portrait too?
He did. He
President
did one of the
Obama's.
Obama's portraits, yes, and it has President Obama seated and a lot of greenery around him with his native greenery. And then I think he mixed in some things from DC, and he's just looking very relaxed with his hands in his lap and looking straight at the viewer.
And who took this beautiful photograph?
I took the photo. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, this is another one that can't come off the wall. This is another ARGS student. And so we had 18 adults that are reading today, one way or the other, and the 12 students. So it's, somehow the kids have early letter names. But we are gonna get to all of you today. So this is called Dogwood by Jack Couchman, and he's another ARGS student. In the first grade, they taught us the dogwood was a state tree. The next year we moved houses and I saw one for what felt like the first time outside my own backyard. There were white ones up the street, but ours was soft pink and in full bloom. There were petals and fallen buds scattered across both sides of the chain link fence that only this tree could cross. It grew up with me. From 7 to 12, I watched it blossom over and over, spring after spring, losing and gaining and losing and gaining, every season change. It was a strong tree with soft petals you could not contain, and it was so beautiful. At 15, the petals slowed down, and there were no new green limbs sprouting, replacing, growing, only decay from the inside out. Only there if you looked hard enough to see it. I could see it. In the way the petals fell more on the outside now, limbs drooping over themselves. It is still standing, maybe a shell of itself, maybe unable to hold weight, maybe never again in bloom, but still standing, still the only thing that could cross the fence. So the piece of art that was paired with this, I have to attribute to myself because it's an art quilt and it's halfway on the wall there, and obviously we won't be able to see it in the camera, but it's called Treasures of the Commonwealth. And I originally made it for a quilt exhibit in 2020, I think it was. And we were supposed to write something that inspired us, and I'm very big on Virginia. And so everything on that quilt are treasures of the Commonwealth. They're the state bird, the state tree, the state flower, the state seashell, but you didn't know we had the state seashell, the state fish, the state bird, which of course is an eagle, the state dog. And so the cardinal there, which is our state bird, is perched in the dogwood, which is both our state tree and our state flower. So when I read Jack's poem, I thought that would go very well with it. The only other thing I want to say before we move on to the next one is you may be noticing that a lot of the kids' poems have what you call adolescent angst in them. It's really striking to me. Part of the difficulty with finding art for some of the other poems from the kids' school at ARGS is that they're very abstract and they're not so much image related. So I went back to ARGS and did a workshop a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it's a month now. I know all these things are blurring into each other. And I challenged the art students at ARGS to make art to go with those other kids' poems, because I reason that they're thinking the same way. And so they will come up with some images. And sure enough, there was one poem that was very abstract, except it had a stop sign in it. And so one of the artists immediately started dashing off during my workshop a moving stop sign. Okay, the next poem was written by somebody none of you have ever heard of. This obscure poet wrote this poem called Dark Sparkle.
Thank you. Dark sparkle. Onyx shot with orange and green, decorative depth of the earth. They say, stonecutters and jewelers who dare to make such statements, if you want to test its truth, hold it to a flame, then drop it in water. If real, it will hold fast, unharmed. If fake, it will melt. Like the witches in Edinburgh, but no one screams, no one drowns. It is silent, it remains polished, to hang from a silver cord about your neck, this mineral of night. See its origin in vowels, Arizona, Algeria, Argentina. Colors of sard, cornelian, never a rose linear remain. They say, ancients whose voices follow us, it lightens childbirth, encourages temper control, strengthens the heart. And whose heart is this, who desires chalcedony? Men for its stark strength, women for its dark drama, citizens of all nations for its versatility. Gemstone, let your ink tears infuse streaks of light and sacred patterns, breathe enchantment into the mundane, clarity into chaos.
And I want to thank my buddy Terry Cox Joseph, in case any of you don't know her. Not only has she been president of PSV for the last several years, but she's found the time to work on several projects with me and with other people. And so thank you both for the poem and your energy. Very well. And the art that goes with that one is on the wall. It's another art quilt. It's mine. And when I read Terry's poem, first I wanted to just have a deep green because there's a lot of green in her poem. But I started thinking about all of the different images of colors and textures in her poem. And so this art quilt of mine really struck me. It's called Cliffs. And if you happen to know the artist Helen Frankenthaler, this art quilt is a reproduction in art quilt of a painting of hers called Cliffs. And I painted on the fabric, I stitched it, it's embroidered, but basically the shapes are the same as Frankenthaler's shapes. And so when I read Terry's poem, I thought, you know, it's got so many things in it, we're gonna use this. Terry, you wanna come hold this thing? The next poem, yeah, will you please hold the picture, then I don't have to do that. The next poem is called Virginia Beach, and it's by yours truly. And I like to say that most of my poems are true stories, except the ones that aren't. And this is a true story. Roaming for hours, searching for sea life, she spots treasure. Among millions of broken fragments of clams, scallops, and mussels, a lone whelk shell, smoothed by tide, flecked with wormholes cracked, its sinistral shape preserved, proud crown intact, tapered waist, pointed tip, the predator inside missing, an empty shell, lying among its bivalve prey, as seagulls swagger in the surf and keen victory over all. I think even from a distance, there's a whelk shell there, and this is was two separate photographs, which I put into Photoshop because I didn't have a precise picture of a seagull on top of a whelk shell. The whelk shells are fairly unusual in that part of Outer Banks. Don't go too far, Carrie. I have to figure out where it is. Where's your deer? Does anybody see my deer? Okay, so, okay, so before we read the poem, and I'm gonna ask Terry to read it, have a look at that lovely animal up there on the wall next to the abstract art.
Right
Terry,
above
what are we-
auditorium.
Interview by Lucille Elliott. Standing at the edge of the dark, I have a flashlight bigger than my arm, and the light lands on a dozen doe eyes. We stand there, me and them, under the stars that only shine in places like these, big empty fields on big empty nights, while a centipede crawls over flip-flop feet. Suddenly, I feel very underdressed. This is a meeting I didn't know I had, an interview, an audition, yet somehow I am right on time. The biggest doe's head dips as its eyes hold mine. There is something solemn in the way she sees my soul. Then the moment snaps, the car rumbles down the road, the does turn tail into the fields. And that is 24/7 in my neighborhood, with deer everywhere.
Tell us how you made it though, because that's
Oh,
interesting.
I did manipulate that one to make it look like watercolor.
Okay, I wish Gail were here because she's really a big part of this project too. And by the way, we will be making a book out of this. I think I've notified all of you about that already. We're trying to recruit a little bit more of the youth art, but we'll go with what we have. So this poem was written by Gail Giewont. And while I'm talking, you can't really see from your seat, but if you see the crab shell and the seaweed, tangled seaweed there, that's the piece of art. So when we get done reading the poems, you can go around and the poems are all next to or underneath their art. But that just gives you something to think about. Discovering Pawpaws by Gail Giewont. Empty clamshells at the riverbed's barren edge, still hinged. Soft meat long ago consumed. The last heat haze of summer. Birch leaves blurred, river babble bathed in morning fog. A sticky scent of rot keeps the air close as a promise. Flies make their own kind of music, symphony for what has fallen, rondo for the coming autumn. Decay has arrived, it is at my feet. I don't recognize the round green shapes on the rocks. I don't. Lift one up to study the sweet, exposed flesh. So much untasted fruit. And that piece of art is by Kathy Abel Nelson, and actually almost all of Kathy's art that is here is for sale. So there you go. The next one is one of the poems that got inspired two pieces of art, both of which were done explicitly for this exhibit, which is pretty cool. And if Bill Glose were here, which he can't be because he's the keynote speaker for Christopher Newport University today, he would have, he was delighted that two people chose his poem. I can't do it in his booming voice. He's got the best delivery ever. Perspective by Bill Glose. 3 a.m. running along the highway, no traffic, no headlights, just a sliver of moon with its phosphorescent glow. Stars so bright and huge, it seems I could reach up and pluck them like fat pears dangling from a low branch. Their light fills my body until I'm floating among them, muscle strain forgotten as the lessons learned in school. 1 mile farther, a pair of stoplights' green glare scares away my new friends. And each step closer feels like a kite being reeled back to earth. At the intersection, behind a screen of trees, a gas station's neon and floodlights over the pumps, the sky above empty, except for the moon's wry smile. Legs now heavier, slower, I ponder perspective. How it's possible to witness the same thing from two vantage points and draw different conclusions. A message there for politics, race, relations, every form of us versus them. But the string of it slips through my fingers. And soon enough, I'm floating again, once more filled off with far-off light. Okay, so this time I have two artist statements. So the first one, and I'll just do it in the order they're up on the wall there. The first one, the abstract one with a sliver of moon and all the bright colors, was done by Tenley Rathel. And here's what she says. Reading Bill Glos's poem, Perspective, I felt a connection with the contrast and conflict between light and dark and the us versus them feuding that is such a problem in our culture. People not being able to listen to others with differing viewpoints, with kindness and respect, to stop and consider each other. This conflict is strong and overpowering. How can we find our perspective? When working to interpret this poem in an abstract style, this is cool. I use round shapes to represent the moon and stars, whether in dark or light. The circle is a symbol of unity and infinity. Light can be seen in the darkness. As light moves into darkness, they both change, but they coexist. It is possible to witness the same thing from two vantage points, 2 points of view. The stars move freely and do not seem bothered by their surroundings. Could the stars be our distant truth? Reach out, touch the stars. There we find guidance, inspiration. Our search for perspective will unite us. Don't let the string slip through your fingers. As an artist, it was a joy to interpret this poem. Well, you know,
it's out.
yeah, I was going to say she could try publishing that, certainly. And Herb Basic did the other one, and so that is the running female figure that is between the abstract art and the clouds next to it. And Herb is not here, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, you are? Well, gee, maybe the artist can come up and talk about his art.
You can read that.
No, you come up, please. You can be the artist. We're so happy to have you here.
I wasn't expecting to talk today. Generally, I'm a figurative artist who concentrates on figures and portraits. So I thought this was a nice interpretation of the runner that Bill talks about in his poem. I tried to capture the grandeur of the starlit sky, which is one of the perspectives that Bill talks about, but also show some of the ground, the stoplight and the gas station in the background. So I think what Bill was talking about was she's alone with her thoughts, and she's trying to understand these two perspectives at the same time, and that's what I tried to capture.
Nice.
Yeah, it's so exciting to hear, you can look at a piece of art, think you understand it or how it came to be. And just like a poem, half the time you don't really have the same perspective as the artist or poet did. Even if you see the image or see the words, they actually might have had something else in mind. Okay, so if you want to turn your attention again to Treasures of the Commonwealth, I chose that one, I curated that one to go with this poem by William Gribben. He's a young man from the ARGS school. And I really liked, for me, this was partly joking irony, and you'll see why in a second. Oh, Virginia. People don't think too much about this place, just another rednecky state. Between the sprawling northeast metropolises and America's theme park, AKA Florida, some quiet mountain towns where everyone knows everyone, a beach where people go when they don't feel like driving any further down the coast, farms dying because old farmers are dying, a couple theme parks, not Six Flags or Disney, a Civil War battlefield every 5 miles along the highway, struggling big towns with boarded up shop fronts and dollar stores where gunshots are as common as birds chirping. Why is this a special place? I don't know, but it really just is. When I first read that poem, I was like, what the heck kind of art are we gonna have to go with that? And so then I thought, what that young man needs is to see Virginia the way I do it. Hence Treasures of the Commonwealth. Clay, will you come forward, please? You have your own version you want to read from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stroke, I'm not real steady on my feet. some people are Virginians by birth. I'm Virginian by choice. After 32 years of police work in hot and humid Florida, I decided I wanted someplace with 4 seasons. But to my shock, you get them all 4 in the same week sometimes.
So true.
Then I saw this placemat at one of the restaurants in Williamsburg, and it gives you an idea of why people would want to move here. And the funny thing, only driving up here with a moving truck, I kept seeing these signs, Virginia is for lovers. I said, what am I getting myself into?
So did Shirley.
Yeah. I found out after being here a while that there's a historic site in every county. There's natural beauty that can't be matched anywhere else. And I've lived in a lot of different places in my time. And a lot of dreams were fulfilled in the Commonwealth, starting with the historic triangle and spreading across the country. So I said, well, this beautiful landscape is actually a dreamscape. That's the title of my poem.
Clay, and, yeah, so you can look at this one is big enough, you can look at that while he's reading from time to time, this one. Oops.
History haunts the Old Dominion like a vagabond lover, like a long forgotten diary we'd like to recover. Our battlefields are silent now, only monuments remain. The ghosts of those who died there no longer feel the pain. From Indian times to the present, nature's beauty is supreme. From the mountains to the seashore, every mile's an artist's dream. Across unsullied fields and rivers, unspoiled landscapes still abound. And by the tombstones in Arlington, we walk on holy ground. The historic triangle transports us back to once upon a time when Virginia had growing pains and had not reached its prime. 8 presidents were Virginians, some rebel leaders too. Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee failed to have a dream come true. Victorian mountains and plantations remind us of days gone by, but Jefferson's natural bridge still captivates the eye. Wildflowers and fauna abound here where dreamers' feet have trod. Perhaps we too will find somewhere the fingerprints of God.
Thank you so much, Clay. He makes the loveliest poems, and he's so good with rhyming, which I envy. I only do it on good days. And the painting over there actually goes with a couple different poems. It's called Field and Stream or Field and River by Jody Grindell. She can't be here today. And so I will not talk about the Nancy Allen poem for right now. Did we read Nancy Allen? No, because she was here and I set it aside in case she showed back up. Okay, but I love this with your dreamscape poem as well, Clay, because this is just such a dreamy view of Virginia. You've got the clouds and the river water and the greenery, and it's really nice. Okay, this next one, Wendy or Wendell Hawken was going to come and is sick. And the big C used to mean one thing, and nowadays it means another. But she's unable to be with us today. So her poem is entitled Alive with Hair, and it is paired with Blue Mountain. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so if you want to hand that forward, please. Wait, we have music. I am going to dance. Okay. Can you hold this? Can you hold this up here? Can you hold it? Okay. Okay, so Wendy's poem is entitled Alive with Hair. I am alive, I have my hair, and clever lungs, pink and puffy in and out. It is early, it is morning, the blue rich black this morning. Songbirds lick their voices at the dead thing in my hand. I am lighter than before, light where light has never been, where you were, dead thing. Lord, how I love this bird song, how it licks into quiet places, licks the morning yellow under custard-colored skies. I am sorry you have died, dead thing, and cannot come after berries I would pick to feed you one by one, blackberries, to fill the bucket up for home, for tea with mother's milk, sugar sucked from island cane, clattering in the fishbone cup. Imagine, dead thing of the rhythmic dark, how blackberries wear their seeds upon their skin, symmetrical and sweet for anyone to see. And this summer, good will be especially good for berries. Blackberries. I will stuff my mouth with blackberries.
This one goes with that photo right here that I took. Burial by Scott Langston. A man was found buried in a well, the only place one could die, away from the hands of body snatchers. Just nearby is the cemetery, containing men obsessed with the ownership of another's body, men bent on bloodshed. They are buried under obelisks and pyramids. The bodies they stole are hidden in lost wells. St. Pete's Barn, Skeleton Gorge by Starr Lewis. Stalactites encompassed your bones. Your body wasn't meant to be there, left on display for tourists. It is nothing more than old stones. I wonder, does your spirit shriek loud weeps and moans? Do you hear the wishing wells splashing on Rock Bay? Stalactites encompassed your bones. I wonder, was the last thing you tasted sweet raspberries and cones? Is your spirit starving to be returned to where your people lay? For tourists, it is nothing more than old stones. Finding you innovated evolution, introduced a multitude of unknowns. I wonder, do you know the answers? Have you watched the years pass day after day? Stalactites encompass your bones. Are you trapped in it? Did you hear your people atone as they had to leave your body? I wonder what you'd have to say. For tourists, it is nothing more than old stones. I wonder, do your bones yearn for the kiss of warm days? What condones your eternal imprisonment? I want you to be able to slip away. Stalactites encompass your bones. For tourists, it is nothing more than old stones. This was taken at a museum in Texas, and it actually had another display behind it that it had a galaxy and stars and moons, and it worked out perfectly with the overlap. So
that's not been manipulated.
Pardon?
That's not been manipulated.
I made the moon a little sharper, but other than that, no, I caught the reflection in the corner of my eye, and I'm hard to tour museums with because I'm always stopping and saying, picture. Okay, it's occurred to me that it's unfair to discriminate against the second half of the alphabet. So I'm gonna go to the back half of the alphabet and move forward for a little bit, and then I'll get in trouble with the middle half. Or middle third, I guess. This one, Drury, you're not here, right? Because I don't have a face to put with your name. Okay, so this one is called Unexpected by Drury Welford. And it was written about Saxus, Appomattox County, Virginia. And there may be spouses who don't know the point of this project, which is now an exhibit and will become a book, is that we are celebrating both the Centennial of the Poetry Society of Virginia and Virginia itself. And so it's called Views of Virginia, which doesn't mean that you can't have some negative views of Virginia too, which we've already heard quite a few of. And that's fine, because nothing is ever unmixed, right? But here's Unexpected by Drury Welford. My daughter and I celebrate my birthday. At 2100 hours, she hurries me out of the back of the cozy cottage to the bay to scan the night sky, seeking darkness for a view towards Wallops Island. We walk to a fallow field beyond which stands an ink-black wood. The Big Dipper dangling above it, the sky broken dark by gibbous moonlight. A sudden roaring cracks evening silence and our heads swivel right, eyes sighting the orange, pink, red blast, course skating a rocket ascending, delighting me, us. Watching in awe the NASA spacecraft, upper atmosphere bound, passing beneath Mars glittering and his cohort moon glowing. The contrail from the rocket fire detaches and undulates backwards away from the thrusting ship and joins the Mars and moon, a floating tableau vivant. Outer space style, overjoyed, I hug my daughter. Roles reversed. Now she shows me the wonders of life. This gift, a childhood fantasy for me of space that would be completed at the sudden appearance of a flying saucer piloted by a little green alien passing the other way towards Earth. And I don't, where is it, Richard?
You're talking about the one with the Virginia one, that one up there with the clouds?
Yes. So we can't take that one off the wall, but Richard's gonna come up.
Can I stand here and do it?
Yeah, okay, sure. So just project.
Okay, so one of the things about that black and white photograph that I happen to like when I saw the scene, but especially after the fact when the photograph was developed, is its horizontality. Everything is horizontal. You have a clouds creating one layer of horizontality. And you've got the distant bank of the James River creating another line. Then you have the foreground bank of the river. But what has always struck me about this particular photograph is the richness of the sky with all those amassing clouds and the poverty of the foreground below, where you probably can't see it very well, we have a tree that's died. And so the branches are just really like skeletal. So you've got that comparison between the massive clouds and the deficiency of the world itself, the earth itself. So that's what I like about that photograph.
Thank you. Yeah, we watched it too. We didn't actually have any artwork that had space aliens in it. And then I looked at Richard's painting, which he had thought might go with another poem too. And I looked at that and I said, you know what? For me, that blackness captures the excitement of the, space day. Okay, so the next one, Martha, you're not here, are you? Or are you? Okay, because there are a couple faces I don't know. So this one is one of the ones that has at least, I actually had to sit on Terry because it would have had 3 pieces of art. It was a very popular poem. And so if somebody, Terry, can you hold up? And, well, maybe you could just see that one.
The label will drop down.
What?
The label.
That's all right, we'll get it later. Okay, so this is the second one that goes with it, and don't block that one so they can look at both at the same time. There we go. Okay, so it's called The Egret, Martha T. Terrell. A great feathered sail, impossibly white, cartwheels across the cerulean sky. A cloudless sea, before coming about and swirling to earth, where the trees grow taller. like a snowy leaf in autumn thrall. So there we are. And let me see, one of those is, okay. Richard, you can stay where you are, but Richard did this one. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about this?
Also, I'll talk about that one. That's by Lori Rokitani, who, and basically she is a Japanese-American artist, works in watercolor. And so you can see a certain kind of mistiness and vagueness and diffuseness, which, you associate not only with watercolor, but with a certain kind of Japanese representation. The photograph that you see there is of two egrets. It was taken in Florida. And, but they're really four because they're reflections of each one. And it struck me that in a way, what you have between, a real object and its reflection, or a real object and its shadow, is basically you have that which is the same and different at the same time, which means it's almost like it traces itself. Because the poem and the image that the poem represents or copies or vice versa, they're the same thing, same subject, but they're in different media, therefore they're the same and different at the same time. Okay.
That's really clever, and I should add that Richard also offered one or two other views of this particular image, where he had made it more abstract and then made it down to a single egret. And I said, oh, no, we can't have that. These egrets are so beautiful together. So thank you very much for sharing that, Richard, and for giving us some perspective on Lori. Okay. Just, well, it was, no, it's right here. Okay. So, Sharon, shall I introduce you to Sharon? Okay, all right, the next one is by Sharon C. Taylor, and I'll invite her to come up and read her poem. And the artwork, I wish we could take it down, we cannot. It is the lovely blue art quilt near the corner. And when we get done, you have to try and take a good look at it, and I'll explain more after Sharon's done reading.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sharon C. Taylor, but I'm also known as Queen Yakini because I started out as a spoken word artist and then I became an author. It was sort of like a backwards. And so most of the poems that I write always have not just a storytelling feel, but also I know that it's a piece that I want to perform, so I write it in such a way that I can perform it, not just read it. And so I want to give a little background about this poem and also the quilt that just blew my mind, because that quilt, if you look at it, it just seems abstract, but it is very enlightening if you know the history. It has a lot of history in that I personally had to research, because I was like, well, what does this mean? And I have a good friend of mine, Nathan Richardson, who just broke it down beautifully, and he couldn't believe that I wrote a poem about the history that I didn't even fully understand. Now, how I came to write the poem was I attended a workshop that Ms. Kathleen Decker had, and she gave us about 5 minutes to write just a quick poem. And I came up with I guess you say the bones of the poem, and don't know where this came from, honestly. But let me just read what I think about the quilt and how it relates to the poem. Okay, they say that the first African landing on American soil occurred in late August of 1619. They say that 20 to 30 enslaved Africans arrived on an English ship known as the White Lion. They landed in a place called Point Comfort, which is known today as Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. It is said that these Africans were traded in exchange for supplies. Ironically, almost 250 years later, runaway slaves would find freedom in the same place but they once lost it. And that is the Fort Monroe Contraband Camp, which is displayed in that quilt. So if you get a chance, look at that quilt, because it really, I think, went perfectly with this poem. And the poem is called A Place Called Point Comfort. They've taken me to a place called Point Comfort. If only I would have known what lay ahead, I would have gotten up earlier to pray and said everything that needed to be said. I would have kissed my wife tenderly, made sure that my children and family had fled. I would have escaped this hideous trauma and fallen upon my righteous blade instead. I don't want to be in a place called Point Comfort. I want my soul to be purged, and I pray that death comes soon. I want to be liberated from this insanity that I'm being forced to consume. I want to be gone from this hell. I want to spread my wings and fly away from this atrocious tomb. When I arrived at Point Comfort, my heart was overwhelmed by grief when I realized what was planned. Black bodies smothered with palm oil and tar, while those with whips stood in command. Slowly, I made my way, with my shackles scraping through the sand. Lustful men were waiting at the auction block, daring to bid on the value of an African man. The stench of greed filled my nostrils while they waved money in their sweating hands. I fear that when I leave Point Comfort, I'll go to a place where brutality is no surprise. I fear there will be no empathy for our suffering, nor will they truly know how many of us have died. They won't care about how they destroyed our sacred bonds or disregarded our family ties, and how they eradicated our language and identities just to control every aspect of our lives. I fear that the best any of us can do now is to find a way for our people to survive. They brought me to a place called Point Comfort. If only I really knew what lay ahead, I would have gotten up earlier to pray and said everything that needed to be said. I would have kissed my wife tenderly, made sure that my children and family had fled. I would have escaped this hideous trauma and fallen upon my righteous blade instead. That will really brought all of this home, because 250 years later, they came right back to the place where they lost their freedom. And that is like, I don't know how you can, that's the fate, destiny, what have you, but that's a remarkable history. So you might want to look that up. Thank you.
I had to look up the history too, because I also had to figure out why that quilt went with two completely different poems. And in fact, it really does. And I'm going to explain why in a second. And she's not with us. Miko Marsh, some of you from down this neck of the woods know Miko Marsh. She does lecturing. She's a poet known as Obelia Conke. So those of you that have read PSV things. But before I read her poem, I want to jump from the 17th century, which Sharan just provided us a good summary of the background about what Point Comfort was back then. And let's jump to the 19th century. And I just want to add a couple of words to what the Grand Contraband Camp was, because when I first saw that on Jenny's quilt, I'm like, okay, there's a marker on here. She's actually taken a photo of a street sign and printed it on fabric, and then it's part of her quilt. But I'd never heard of the Grand Contra Man Camp. So it was actually located in Elizabeth City County, Virginia, on the Virginia Peninsula near Fort Monroe during and immediately after the Civil War. The area was a refuge for escaped slaves whom the Union forces refused to return to their Confederate masters by defining them as contraband of war. So what happened was the Southern white people said, we want our slaves back. And the Union soldiers said, well, first of all, you're not part of the Union anymore. And second of all, if they're property, we've got them now, so they're our property. So that's how come they're contraband. And it was the first self-contained Black community in the United States, except for one, which I've been corrected. There was a self-contained Black community in the 1600s around, yeah, you know it too. But they were not free, okay? These people were free. And guess what? It's modern day Hampton, Virginia. That's what it is. So, Obelia Conke wrote the following poem, which is up there next to the same quilt, called Fried History, and I can't do the accent. Do you want to read Obelia's poem? No, because then, well, it's very tiny, because somehow I can't find a piece of paper, so I don't know if you can read it or.
Oh, it's on the.
Yeah, okay, all right, I'll read it, because I have it almost memorized. I know. Young people are really good at this, but I have it almost memorized, because I've seen all your poems so many times. Fried History, to the little girl who loved fried chicken until she saw the cartoons that mocked her. Take a load off, Lena May. Come and have a seat by me. I want to share a history that's worthy of mention. Less than 100 years ago, in a town north of Richmond, Black women were building houses out of chicken. It started in the mid-1800s when trains became popular. Gordonsville was a hub for transportation. An opportunity sprung up, creating an income source for those seeking work after emancipation. Dining cars didn't exist, and passengers would be hungry. Women learned to make money from their kitchens. From slaves to self-employed, waiter carriers were born, making the town the world's capital for fried chicken. Passengers placed orders from windows to the women on the platform, who trekked miles with coffee, meals, and pies in tow. They set their hours and prices, side dishes and spices, with no cap on how high their income could grow. Imagine being denied every right but earning economic freedom. To put your name on the house you bought then, they earned to build schools, assist neighbors, and contribute to fundraisers. These quiet activists should never be forgotten. So eat your chicken with pride. It was meant to be enjoyed. Bella Winston and others brought fame to Virginia. We won't be ashamed of the road ancestors paved. Get rest. I'll speak on watermelon another day.
Okay, Terry. You have your screen covered? Every summer we used to go camping on the Shenandoah River, so when I think of Virginia, I think of the Shenandoah River. Her sound.
Hang on just a second.
Her sound is water rolling over stone, heartbeat repeating itself in an endless loop. Her body is weather worn, flushed by thaw of spring flowing. Pulsating sky reflects downward into her bed of visible world. Soaking rains pour into her veins, swelling her womb. She echoes life's mystery and smells of green grass, soil, and lightning.
Her shimmering finesse slips through our hands as her heart continues beating. Lip-dip, lip-dip, lip-dip.
Oh, thank you, Jack. Obviously that is the one that you saw before with the canoe, but it's so obviously a river and it's a quiet, the current is slow like Terry's poem, so I thought that was a really good fit. Blue Ridge Mountains by Laura Rakatani, I'm not sure where they are. Jack, are they on what?
There's some in the hall.
Yeah, I think it's in the hall. There's more than one set of mountains that look like Blue Ridge. So you're looking for Lori Rakatani and some blue mountains. You got it?
Hear it?
I don't think so. I don't want to mess with it. So look for that one in the hall when we're done. Okay, so this is another kid from the Appomattox Regional Governor's School, named Nyasia Norman. And her poem is entitled My Side. And I'm going to kind of do this because there's a headline to the three sections of the poem. Birthplace, Appalachian Mountains, a bluish gray tone stretching for 348 miles, separating us from the city, pushing the two aside. The full body of matter, green land masses to be exact, now split into communities of different worlds, laying on the shoreline of my small hometown. Life. Surrey County. Stillness around, waves crashing in the distance, birds holding a tune, connections binded like twine between my inner self and the atmosphere. Walking down the steep hill, my toes caressing through the sand, I'm greeted by a soft tide carrying away sand particles, the wind flowing through my thin jacket and ripped leggings. A cold breeze tickles my skin, the little hairs on my neck rise, then fall as the breeze passes, soon to stir up some tree leaves nearby. My body collapses, letting nature overtake my presence, although I can still feel the water touching my toes periodically. Beams of light covering the land below, heating up my body temperature. I close my eyes, taking in the opportunity for rest. Seconds, minutes, hours pass. Orange and red begin filling the sky. Mesmerization nourishes my soul. Sparkles of night slowly creeping into the picture. I sit up and clean myself off, ready to take on a new journey as I walk away, leaving the domain in my rear view. Death Place, Chesapeake Bay in Hampton Roads. Well, I don't know what Nyasia was thinking. I hope that was not, soon anyway. Maybe she means that she loves Virginia so much she'll be here forever. I prefer to think that way anyway. Richard, since you know Lori, can you say anything about her painting?
Let me see, I have a picture of it, that's the best thing I can do.
Oh, well, it's in the hallway. I just didn't know if you had any insight into what she was thinking.
No.
So she's one of the artists who sent me a bio, but not a specific statement. Okay, so the next one is Susan Notar. Susan is not here. And Protectors. So that one goes with the Blue Mountains here by Monica Shuffler. So it's the Blue Mountains right next to Jennifer. Protectors by Susan Notar. When the light creeps over us, it smells like wet earth after rain. We reach for it, shaking off our slumber, comforting finches, robins who still doze, imagining their earliest days in the nest. We shake off our aches, weight of years of trees clinging to us in storms, or when they quake, hearing the whir of lumbermen's saws. We feel the coolness of waters rush over our rocks in White Oak Canyon, hear deer hooves trip along our paths. We listen when people walk or climb among us as they seek solace amongst our pines, or as they press upon the trunks together, kissing. When dusk descends in a crescendo of purple, mauve, vermilion, coolness like peace, like forgiveness nestles upon us. We would rest finally, holding our trees, creatures, people. We are Shenandoah. And we're going back to the end of the alphabet here. You need it printed out? Okay, so the next one is by my dear friend and fellow poet, Paul Evans Savas. And the artwork for it is, okay, so this, okay. So go ahead and read the poem and then I'll talk about it.
Thank you for the opportunity and the job well done as always, to Kathleen and Kathleen. Just a word about my poem, if I may. Poetry, as far as writing, to me has come recently in my retirement. And although it's been this dormant desire, and somehow through my education, I don't know how I looked past it, but I did. Ironically, I graduated from Walt Whitman High School in Long Island, New York. And for years in grade school, Walt Whitman's birthplace was my bus stop. So all this poetry background, I guess, sort of came to me now that I've had time to think. And I've really enjoyed it. And becoming a member of the society and meeting and learning and reading others' poems has really been a wonderful experience and a part of development for me. I want to commend Kathleen for another clever little project, you know, ekphrasis and reverse ekphrasis, and sometimes you get a little dizzy, but I think that this truly was a clever little project, and I couldn't wait to find out who would dare pick my poem and then see what they came up with, and I really am satisfied and quite impressed on Jody's simple painting. She calls it "Shall I Have Another Dozen?" And I really was taken by surprise on that title. I should have maybe named my poem that, but I really appreciated that. Regarding the assignment to give a tribute to Virginia, having been born in Brooklyn, New York, and growing up on Long Island, and spending much time on the Hudson River and the Hudson River Valley, then moving to Virginia because my parents moved here in their retirement in 1980. I understand why Thomas Jefferson decided to settle in Virginia, and I understand the meaning of the rivers of Virginia, and it seems like the rivers have gotten a lot of credit in the poems presented. To me, the jewel is the Rappahannock, and because of its significant history in Virginia history, its continued lifestyle and part of society, meaning if you're from Richmond, where are you going this weekend? I'm going to the river. And you get to the river and it's all about river life, and it's RIVAH. And this thing is almost a cult. And I think the Rappahannock is one of the rivers that when they say they're going to the river, they're going to the Rappahannock, it seems like to me. And the final point about the river is the world-renowned oysters. And depending on your taste of oysters, it's hard to argue against the oysters coming out of the Rappahannock River. So I wrote a short, quiet little poem called Rappahannock. And the title, the name of the river, comes from the Rappahannock Indian tribe that settled on the Rappahannock. And they used the term, an Algonquin word called the Lapahani. The Rappahannock Indians called the river the Lapahani. So I wrote this little poem just for the river. Now, it's been a little unorthodox in all of this, and I was sitting there thinking, I've written this poem and written it and rewritten it thousands of times and read it, but I never heard my poems ever read by someone else. So not to put anybody on the spot, but I think someone that gives a great delivery. And a tribute to our outgoing president, could Terry please read my poem so I can hear my poem?
Oh, wow.
If you don't mind. I've heard it so many times, but I've never heard it read. So if you don't mind doing it, I'd be honored as our president.
Nice voice. Rappahannock. Beyond the jostling crab hat boys, where yellow willow vespers glow and shimmering ripples ebb and flow, osprey flock with noontime cries and whistling reeds peck round the bend. The Rappahannock sings its current tunes as silver shells echo to the moon, while oysters boast their cultured prize.
So I have to say a couple of words. Jody Grundell is a Williamsburgian, and you will not be able to miss her painting when you go look in the hallway. There's a guy with sunglasses and a teal-colored shirt, and he's got a big plate of oysters in front of him. And Jody loved Paul's poem, and she was reluctant to part with this because these are her words. This is my husband Ray at our favorite oyster bar off the Rappahannock River. He's already eaten his first dozen oysters and is contemplating another. Early settlers to Virginia found piles of oyster shells, which were remnants from Native American feasts. Truly a cultured prize. So, thank you. Oops. So, Northern Neck Sunrise, where are you? Oh, okay. So now I want you, I was hoping Nancy Allen would come back, but she apparently did not. So unfortunately, I will have to read for her. And those two paintings were paired with her. And so the quilt, which is on the left, with the wine glass on the chair, which I'll be doing later tonight, was done specifically for this. And Jody did that quilt as well. So both of those two pieces of art were done by the same artist, and just goes to show Jody's flexibility in going from art quilting and fabric art to the watercolor. And I guess I'll do this backwards and read what Jody said about the Nancy Allen poem and that art quilt. Northern Neck Sunrise is the title of the art quilt. This early morning sunrise on the lower Appomattox in Westmoreland County on the northern neck of Virginia was so breathtaking, I had to take a photo and then paint it. Well, that's that one, sorry. For the record, for the tape, misidentification, the art quilt is Susan Novak's, not Jody Grundell's, but Jody does actually do both kinds of work. She does a lot of art quilts too. So I will just read Nancy Allen's poem, Virginia, Nancy C. Allen, and you can look at the art quilt that was done by Susan Novak of Williamsburg. Land of mountains, gorgeous mountains, stretching in the distance where birds take flight, graceful and free. The river below laps against the shore, seagulls perch on the water's edge. Wild geese nestle on the river rocks, and surging waves flash white. Tall trees stand near the river, the leafy branches hug the sky a startling blue in the sun. Wheels of light fall on vibrant wildflowers just beyond the trees. In the sky are a few fluffy clouds, and beautiful is Virginia. Okay, so there's that one. And this is the artwork that goes with the next painting, and this is a Kathy Abel Nelson drawing, and if you're in the back of the room, you can see there's a tiny house with a long dock going over a marsh to get to it. And this poem is by Molly Odell, and it's called Ode to Calais Wharf Packing House. Cockeyed metal awnings droop over your west-facing windows. For sale signs shed like skin from rough wood siding. Your bayside door opens to spray. Broken sills lurch leeward, bleached planking gleams with afternoon light. What's left of day squints between shingles tossed and torn. Gaps command as much respect as well-worn creases of a well-used map. From the kayak, I watch watermen pull up crab pots. They say this measly harvest comes from farm runoff, hungrier predators, and less seagrass. The wind blows from the northwest at almost 10 knots. The heart of your place leans inward into itself, a reverent salute to work done here. I yearn for memories whispered by fishermen who tied their crafts to your crumbling wharf. Atop the roof, a pair of osprey coax their fledglings. Ferns grow from rotted crumbs of pier decking. In a tree between here and home, a pair of eagles rest. Everyone in the neighborhood loves welcoming these birds back year after year. When I walk through your yard, I see pennywort, fringed sedge, trumpet vine, and the blood pink centers of marshmallow blooms. Once raised, your remains will be slim. Shards of glass, rotten splinters, a few old rusty nails bound to be swept by the wind. We have to go backward. Look at the art quilt again because I found Susan Novak's artist statements. As Nancy Allen's poems Virginia celebrates the peaceful beauty of the Blue Ridge, the tall trees outlined against the sky and the river flowing past, this quilt captures the serenity of the Virginia scene at sunset as the sun shines its reflected glory on the water. Okay, so we have two more, and I'm going to ask you to come up and read The Hidden Lavender Farm. Terry, please.
I love reading what people write to go with the work, especially when it's mine.
Where is the lavender farm?
This is actually, well, I'll tell you afterward. The Hidden Lavender Farm by Elaine Satterfield. Patches of lace baby's breath align long winding roads leading to outdated cabins and quiet, unfamiliar buildings. Through the dark trees, there lies a lavender field where children dance about. But flower petals scratch their knees and arms while they snip away at the stems and tie the pieces together, wanting to bring home the lullaby scent of the lavender. Curious insects that I have never met before wander through the meadow of purple and green, their antennae grazing my fingertips. The bugs take turns dipping their long tongues into the bundles of dreams in our hands. Hovering too close, I catch one and examine strange stripes and wings. Its elongated dandelion body resembles a bee, but it does not sting while it rides in my grasp, my relentless grasp, until I choose to loosen my fist and set it free into the hazy blue sky. If you are so inclined, there's a lavender farm outside of Williamsburg. It's called the Williamsburg Lavender Farm. And you pay a set fee and they hand you a scissors and a basket. And they have 4 different varieties and you go out and pick whatever you want. It gets hot out there, so wear a hat.
Ice cream too. The lavender ice cream.
Oh, yes, I didn't have any lavender ice cream, but I did have lavender lemonade. It was good.
Cool. And this is the last poem for this series today. And Richard is sitting right next to it, so we can just leave it there and then you can explain afterwards, because everybody can kind of see if you turn around that, there's a cardinal layer on the Muse. So this is the last poem that we have for now, called On a Cardinal's Tailwind by Adam Rowe. Every morning the sun folds over your wings, a warm blanketing wave. When the world whips over your shoulders and the wind blushes, you lift yourself from tree line and run into the sky. I love you and I'm becoming you. I am tasting the flowers on the morning wind and singing to the tune of dewdrops. I am holding myself and nothing bad has ever happened to me. You are flying.
Yeah, well, the photograph is simple to explain. I just put a tripod and a long lens in my deck, and it's been cropped because what you don't see is the feeder. And I took many of them. They're hard to take, especially this particular lens I have is very hard to focus. And this one was one of the better ones that I got. And the thing that ties it to the poem is this idea of holding still. This bird held still for me because I made it still.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Richard. Again, I want a round of applause for the ones who are not here, namely the children of the. They really did awesome work, and I think the highest compliment, I will not identify the poet, but when we were at the Centennial, one of the adult PSV members was reading through one of the kids' poems, and he goes, "This looks like the first draft of a poem I could write." I was like, okay. Well, I want to thank everybody. So don't forget, there are things for sale, Centennial pins, which are $5, and Centennial mugs, which are $10. And there are books from the paper-bound version of the PSV anthology, which is 18, and then a couple of other items out there. There's food and water. The water is probably still in the kitchen, but yeah, so munch, nibble, and then please go look at everybody's poems and art next to each other, especially the ones that are on the wall that we couldn't take down. And I want to thank you so much. This has just been awesome. It's going to be so much fun making this into a book. I'm really looking forward to it. And we already have one child artist. Everybody knows Hood Fraser, right? Chapman Hood Fraser. Okay, Chapman's granddaughter is precocious. She started writing poetry, but she also was with Hood when he came to my workshop at ARGS a few weeks ago. And she liked my poem, Virginia Beach, and she has drawn since that workshop, she has drawn a lovely picture of Virginia Beach. Yeah, I know. And it's Gail, too, fostering the development of these kids. What's really funny is, like me, she just juxtaposed the whelk shell and the seagulls. So when we make a book, I'll probably suppress my art in favor of hers because it's so cool to get the kids in there. But if you are so multifaceted, like some of you are, and you do art as well as poetry, we have 24 artworks here today, and we have 30 poems. And there actually are a total of 40 poems. So if you are interested or know an artist that might be interested, email me and I will resend you the entire set of 40 poems, and we'll see if we can't, because I really ideally like to have one poem, one piece of art facing each other on each page of the book. And if we have more than one piece of art, we'll deal with that when we get there. But thank you so much. Terry, you want to say anything else? No. Thank you.
Great job, Kathleen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we met at the last year's Little River. I live in Ocean View. I remember you lived in.
There I was.
Yeah. here.